historical impact. I'm going to suggest, Dr. Tajiri, that we're in the coronavirus age, and who knows how long this might last. But Dr. Miriam Tajiri is with us, and she's going to talk about her Prevent to Study program that really is concerned with serious issues. And when I say serious, I mean life and death issues. Also, this show would not have been possible without the collaboration and the support and the love shown by the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation and the cultural ambassadors. Reverend Perry, I wondered if you might just share a few words regarding the Yale cultural ambassadors before we introduce Dr. Tajiri, just to let people know that there's really a uniform community kind of commitment to sharing medical information, sharing clinical information, sharing what it means to be healthy as we move forward, and how citizens can be involved, but particularly the spotlight on the Yale cultural ambassadors. So if you could just spend a few minutes sharing a little bit with folks. This is your promo opportunity to kind of share with folks about the Yale cultural ambassadors before we introduce Dr. Tajiri.
Yes, the Yale cultural ambassadors, which are made up of Junta and the AME Zion pastors and church and community. We have in collaboration with Yale to try to help with the health disparities within our community in terms of research and in terms of giving out the information that's necessary to prevent some of these diseases that so affect our community. So I'm just happy that we could do this show, because I think it's important that our community is aware of this prevent program with regards to pneumonia, and that and all of the intricacies that's involved in this, and how Yale and the IRB is making sure that our community understands this process, and how this process can be life-giving, and at the same time it's something that may prevent pneumonia in the future for members of our community. So it's a necessary end, and I'm just happy that we could be on this call together to talk about it and to share this information with our community.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Dr. Tajiri, I don't want to embarrass you, but I have to read a little bit of your background, because as I read it, I've read it about 10,000 times since we last spoke last Friday. But every time I read it, something dawns on me new. And Dr. Miriam Tajiri is professor and vice chair of clinical research in the Department of Anesthesiology at Yale School of Medicine. But before joining Yale, she was an endowed professor, vice chair for research at the Oregon Health and Science University. I'm not sure what an endowed professorship means. That generally means you can stay there for the rest of your life and do whatever you want. So for her to leave Oregon and to come to the East Coast, I'm not sure what that's all about, Dr. Tajiri, but maybe on our next show you'll tell us. But welcome to the East Coast. She is but beyond that, she's an internationally recognized leader in the area of clinical and outcomes research in the perioperative setting, with special emphasis in critically ill and neurocritical care patients. And as Reverend Dr. Perry has just mentioned, she's really involved with saving lives when folks are in the most critical stage, and really, literally a life and death situation. So she's devoted her life to how can we save people, live longer, when it really the odds might necessarily be stacked against them, but it might be a tough road. She received her medical training in Italy and Switzerland, and following her anesthesiology residency, she completed a fellowship in critical care medicine at Geneva University Hospital in Switzerland. And she earned her, I just want to take a moment to mention that she earned her master's in public health and epidemiology at the University of Washington. For me, Dr. Tajiri, because you not only are concerned with individual health, but public health and global health. So that of concern in terms of your professional career is really impressive. And also her Master of Public Health pertains to community medicine. She completed her PhD in epidemiology at the University of Washington. Dr. Tajiri, have I embarrassed you enough with kind of talking about how great you are? I have joked, but I'm half serious, everybody. If you Google her name just before you present Dr. Tajiri, you will find over 1,000 or so citations where her name has been mentioned in terms of research. So we really are kind of blessed to have her share with us what's involved. And so, Dr. Tajiri, please take it away. I'm really glad that you could be with us this morning.
So thank you very much. I feel like I do feel embarrassed for all the nice things you said about me. But truly, all I've done through my career is trying to find ways to make improve quality of care and make our patients so they can feel better and become, we can get them back to their life in a better fashion. So today I will share our new upcoming study, which actually also is in line with, my career goal to improve care for many patients that are really sick. So I'm going to start sharing my screen so you can see my slides in just a second. And so I will go over the details, some of the details, and explaining why we're doing this study. Everything I'm going to say today is also on our website. So if you miss anything, or if you want to go back and find some of the information that I am providing, you can go to our website. Our website is medicine.yale.edu/prevent2. And the website has very similar information to what I'm saying today. And also the website has a opportunity to provide feedback to the team. So at the end of this presentation, you can go to the website, click on the link that has a questionnaire, a survey. It's very brief, but it's important to us to know your opinion about the information I'm going to give today. So you heard about me. I am kind of the leading person on this study, and the study will be conducted at Yale University, specifically at Yale New Hospital. And the study is supported financially by the National Institute of Health. So we'll start with talking about the problem, why we are trying to address this situation with this particular study. Many patients that are in the hospital, they can develop pneumonia, which is infection of the lungs. And this is a common problem, and especially when patients are really sick, like patients that are in intensive care units. And so the reason why pneumonia happens in patients that are quite sick, and especially in the intensive care unit, is that in the hospital in general, being in the hospital allow bacteria to colonize the mouth and the airways. And so these bacteria that are not normally present start growing in the airways. And then with time, these bacteria kind of make their way down lower in the lower part of the airways and then reach the lungs. And this bacteria will cause a pneumonia. And so why pneumonia is a problem is because actually there could be other complications that come with inpatient that develop pneumonia. And this includes spending more time in the hospital, and some patients actually die from pneumonia. So it's something that is a complication that we want to try to avoid as much as possible. And so some of the risk factors that lead to development of hospital pneumonia, so the type of pneumonia that develops once the patient is in the hospital, is the use of a breathing machine, a ventilator, and ventilators are connected to a patient through a breathing tube. And so there are studies that show that actually 1 in 4 patients that are on a breathing machine end up developing pneumonia. And this is just
Dr. Tajiri?
Yes.
If you could just elaborate on the 1 in 4, that seems to be a pretty high ratio. Is that just due to the pre-existing conditions, or just the volatility of and the uncertainty of the medical diagnosis? That's an important important note for all of us to be aware of.
Yeah, so it's especially so 1 in 4 patients of those that are on a breathing machine, and especially those that are on a breathing machine for longer time. So because the longer it takes to be on the breathing machine and come out of the breathing machine, the longer time there is for bacteria to grow and make their way down. So if a patient is on a breathing support for longer, definitely has much higher risk of getting pneumonia associated with the ventilation. And so this figure refers specifically to patients that have been on the breathing machine for at least 2 days.
Thank you.
So being on the breathing machine is, so basically the machine is the breathing machine is a machine that help people breathe easier when they lose the ability to breathe on their own, and allows to bring oxygen to the lungs. And so as you can see in the picture on the right side, you see the breathing machine and the tubing that deliver the air. They're connected to the patient through a breathing tube. And the breathing tube actually is inserted in the patient's mouth and descend down in the windpipe. And so it's kind of lodged in the windpipe with a sort of a balloon or a cap near the end of the tube. And this cap allowed to seal the windpipe away from the mouth and the pipe that goes to the stomach. So the vomit from the stomach or the content of the stomach or the content of the mouth don't go down the wrong way. And so it's a protection for the airway to keep them clean from liquid and secretions that are in the mouth. But however, even if we have this balloon at the end of the tube that inflates and create that seal that separate the airway from the stomach pipe, secretion can still accumulate on top and can still with time make their way down toward the lungs. And so if you see this blue dye slowly is leaking down, and this blue dye represents those liquids that are contaminated with bacteria, and now the bacteria that shouldn't be in the lungs go in the lungs and develop and cause pneumonia. So the way we could prevent, or potentially prevent pneumonia, is to develop a special breathing tube that addresses some of the problem of the leakage that happens above the cup. And so this is the regular on the left side, the regular basic tube that you saw inserted in the picture before. And this is actually a modified breathing tube that has a hole right above that cup. And so the liquid that accumulated above can actually be suctioned out through this yellow port right here. So this channel is connected to a suction device, and the fluid, like at the dentist, that accumulated in the mouth can be removed before actually they go down. The other features of this tube is that the material of this balloon or the cup is kind of special. It's very thin and allows less leakage once the fluid starts going down toward the lungs. And these
Dr. Tregeri, if I just might interrupt, share with us a little bit about how long did you have this idea before you were able to put it into motion? Because it just seems to me with your research and your commitment and your observation of people's success from a hospitalization standpoint, I guess just give us a little clue. Did you have a dream 4 years ago and you woke up and you said, this is it?
Oh no, it's been at least 10 years. So this is a lot of work to get to this point. Before doing this study, first of all, these tubes have exist for a long time, but they have been studied in other studies, but the study are not sufficient quality to make a determination whether the tube is actually how much the tube is helping. And so over 10 years ago, we wanted to test these tubes, and doing research is a very long stepwise process. So before doing this study that we're proposing today, we did what we call a pilot study. So we did a smaller study that was really identical or very, very similar to this one, just to see if the logistics and the procedures and the activity we are doing in the study were actually feasible, because we don't want to study that is this important and this big and make any missteps. So we wanted to make sure we design the study in a way that will bring results that will be useful, important, and meaningful. We don't want to do a study and then don't have a conclusion. So it took really many years to get to this point. And also, in general, to do a study of this nature, it requires financial support. And so that's also a process that takes time as well to garner the financial support to actually do it. So
that's really helpful to know. Very helpful to know in terms of the history and the length of time sometimes involved and your commitment to this issue. Please proceed.
So as I was mentioning, the material of this tube is also different. The material is called urethane. It's very thin, and as you can see in this cartoon, if we put dye on top of the cap, you can see that there is no green dye that leaks below, or very minimal, almost invisible. But with the classic tube, which is done in materials in PVC, after a while, the seal is not perfect, and then the leakage goes on and cause potential problems. And this is exactly why we designed this study. So we wanted to compare these two tubes, so the basic tube and the tube with the suction port and the special cap, to determine if we can actually decrease the onset of pneumonia, which, as we mentioned earlier, are causing up to 25% of cases that receive the standard breathing tube. And the idea for us is to compare the special tube with the suction port and the cap material to the basic tube to see if it does prevent pneumonia.
Dr. Trujillo, just on that, could you click back to that slide just before this one? Could you just elaborate a little bit more, because this is so important from a timing standpoint, why you needed the Food and Drug Administration approval. I don't think normally the regular consumer doesn't understand the regulations, the monitoring, the evaluation, just really what's involved to even do a study. So I was just curious about the length of time that you might need to conduct the study, how we can continue to share the word with people, and your comparison techniques.
Okay, so the study actually from the time the study is still in the planning, because we are actually we are in the stage where we're seeking feedback and input from the community to meet all our regulatory requirements. Once the study will be open to enrollment, meaning that we deploy the study, the intervention, it would take about 18 months to collect the sample that we need, that we plan to include to make that determination for the results that we want to compare. As I mentioned here, so the main mechanism that we want to look at is reducing pneumonia. But ultimately, what we want to know is if we reduce pneumonia, does that also help the patient in the long term? Because the fact that we can prevent a complication, our hope is that we can also make patients better like 6 months down the road after they have been intubated and they have left the hospital or the ICU. So it's after the 18 months of enrollment, then we're gonna still continue to follow the patients all the way 6 months after they've received the tube to make sure that we hope to see that they do better. And so this actually leads me to this other slide that says that we think that if we can prevent pneumonia, patient can maintain a better quality of life and then return to normal into what they were before in a better fashion. And so also some patients, when they are very sick, their thinking ability kind of declines a little bit. So we want to make sure that actually they can maintain at best the best ability to function. And so we will enroll about 1,000 patients. So it's going to be a big study. But in the hospital, we do a lot of these emergency intubations. And so I will go over the intubation. So the process of placing the breathing tube in the next slide.
Jerry, this is Pastor Clayton. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
We
Yes.
can hear you, Dr. Clayton.
Oh, okay. How many patients have the special tube been used on thus far?
In general, I cannot give a number, but these tubes have been approved by the FDA for more than 15 years, so almost 20 years. And some hospitals use this tube exclusively. Some hospitals don't use them at all. And some hospitals use them at some point and then they switch. So it's hard to tell. I don't know that nobody really knows how many times they've been used, but I would say hundreds of thousands have been used in the past. And again, the reason why there's uncertainty whether they should be used or not is because the data that supported the use are not clear, are not super clear, and primarily they're not so very clear because of the way the tubes are being indicated. So meaning that the current indication for use of this tube is actually for patients that require ventilation for more than 2 days. And the problem is that when patients require emergency placement of this tube, nobody knows how long they will require intubation. So our idea expanded use by saying anyone that requires emergency intubation probably should be intubated or should have this tube placed. And so that will make it easier for the providers to decide or to determine which tube they should be using. Because if we knew that every time there is an emergency intubation, there's only one type of tube that should be used, then it would be very applicable to the reality of every day when we do these actual procedures. So we're trying to share clarity on how and when this tube should be used. And by doing that, we want to show, we want to have certainty that the tube will help the patients. We want to make sure that actually they help. And again, the mechanism by which the tube is helpful is by reducing the leakage, reducing the infection in the lungs, and making the patient better in the long term. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
And so these patients, so this is a different situation with the prior studies because we are addressing specifically intubations that happen in an emergency situation. So this study will involve patients that are really sick, so they're critically ill, only adults, and a patient that require this emergency procedure, so emergency placement of these breathing tubes. And this can happen either in the hospital or in the emergency room. And basically during this study, while the study is ongoing, patient could be intubated, could receive the tube, the basic tube, which is the standard tube that we commonly use right now as standard of care, or they can receive the more specialized tube, which is the one we talked about with the for aspiration of secretions and the special cath. But the way so there's not going to be a provider decision. The way that is decided what tube the patient receive is like a flip of a coin. There's going to be 50% chance of getting one tube or getting the other tube. And so once one of the study tubes has been placed, the research team will access the patient record. And so what we are going to do, the first step is we're going to look at identify all the patients that have received the breathing tube in the prior 24 hours. And so once we identify who received the tube, and if it was a tube that was part of the study, we'll be reviewing the patient record to see if they develop pneumonia, because that's our interest. We want to know if the pneumonia is different. And then also, we're also going to look at safety data, making sure that there is no difference in the safety and any risk between the two different tubes. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, what this research team will do will contact the patient 6 months later and actually have them come back to see us. And so we can ask questions to see how they're doing and also evaluate if there were any complication related to the airway, related to the presence of that breathing tube.
Dr. Trigeri, I really like this slide here, because if I understand you correctly, oftentimes people will think that they're part of a process, but not really. No one really cares about them after they say give their blood. But in this case, if I understand you correctly, you really are following up and communicating with people that have participated, and their response to which tube they had is important, so that they feel a full part of this whole. It's not like a research thing, not like guinea pig thing, but they're actually a full participant. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct. And actually, it's really important for us to know how patients are doing in the long term, because sometimes we see this patient while they're in the hospital, and then patient maybe go back to their lives or go back to their own doctors, and then we ended up not knowing if the consequences of what we've done. And so it's really important that if we make a change, we make a change that lasts, and that is important for the patient. And that's why we're doing the long-term review of the result, or how the outcomes that we're gonna have.
Excellent, thank you.
And here I want to explain something that why this study is different from most research studies. And so typically when patients or participants want to enter a research study, the study is explained to them, and they can review a form which is called informed consent, and the informed consent is signed. So there is good understanding of the study procedures and the responsibility of the investigator and of the participant. But in this case, there is no opportunity really to explain, because the tube is placed in an emergency situation. And so when certain studies are done under emergency conditions, the federal government allows to conduct certain study procedure with a waiver of consent. However, we need to meet very strict criteria to be able to do that. And the criteria are listed in this slide. And so the patient needs to be in a life-threatening situation and is unable to provide consent at that point. And the family members are not immediately available to provide consent as well. The treatment might benefit the patient with reasonable risks. The study could not be done without the waiver. And most importantly, and the reason why we want the community engagement is because the community, we want the community feedback to agree to participate in the study. The study meets the strict criteria for a waiver of consent. And this is because the window time between the decision to place the breathing tube and the time we put the breathing tube is really, really short. We're talking about seconds to minutes. And so many participants that are in that situation will not have the chance to give consent to have one of the two breathing tubes placed. And again, so the window is really short, and every minute counts when we do this emergency procedure. And so it's unlikely that the patient will be able to make a care type decision during this time. But if possible, we will make every effort to contact the patient representative with the family to ask if they want to opt out of the research, so if they don't want to be in the study.
Dr. Trigeri, let's just stay on the last two slides, because this is really an important issue. And I just wondered if anyone has a question, because you may be reading this, is something going to happen to a person and he or she not given permission? But as Dr. Trigeri has tried to indicate, to get permission to have something happen without consent is only due to life and death situations. But I just wondered if someone wants to comment on if they agree with that, if they understand why it's necessary, because this is really a key a key issue. Would anyone like to comment?
Hi, this is Irene. I just had a question. Has there been any life-threatening situations or complications identified so far?
When a breathing tube is placed in emergency, it is always a life-threatening situation, because sometimes if you don't help the patient breathe right there and give more oxygen, the patient might not even survive. And so those are supporting breathing. It's always a life-threatening situation. It is not a life-threatening situation if a patient requires a breathing tube for a surgery. For example, sometimes patients require anesthesia and to undergo surgery, they do receive a breathing tube. But that is a planned situation and something that you can discuss with the anesthesiologist, with the surgeon, etc. It's different from when a patient, suddenly lose the ability to breathe, and even sometimes they can receive extra oxygen through the face, through a face mask, but sometimes that is not sufficient. And so these patients that go to the point of needing the help of the breathing machine, they would die if they wouldn't get the breathing tube placed. So I don't know if that answers your question, but we expect most, if not all, emergency intubation to be in a situation of life-threatening conditions.
Dr.
And
Jajeri,
then with the special tube itself versus the regular tube, have you identified any different situations that have arisen in using that tube?
No, the situation is the same. The tubes, even if they kind of the features are different, the way we place the tube, the way the tube sits in the windpipe is exactly the same. So we haven't seen any differences between the two in the emergency placement.
And I think there was one other question.
Dr. Jajeri, with the evidence thus far with the special tube, is it any way possible to put this in the fast track? Because it's obvious that if it's 1 in 4 people get pneumonia, well, that means that this special tube is far more important than one would imagine. And so is there any way that we could kind of fast track it to get it more widely used in hospitals to help those in those emergency situations?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Very good point. And this is really the reason why we're doing the study. The tubes are, approved by the FDA, and actually the CDC, the Center for Disease Control, recommends this tube with a moderate emphasis. So basically, the CDC opinion on these tubes is that yes, they're useful, they help prevent pneumonia, but the data are moderately good. And for convincing people and the medical community and the healthcare providers to use it in intervention, you need data that are considered high quality. So these available data that we have are moderate quality for saying this tube prevents pneumonia. So we want to do the study to provide high level, high quality data, and then that would be convincing, a convincing situation to have hospitals and providers use the breathing tube. So first of all, we need the high quality data, and second, we need to provide the indication. So this study potentially will change the approach, because instead of saying you can only use this tube when a patient is so sick that it's going to be on a breathing machine for a long time, we can say you can place this breathing tube every time you do an emergency intubation, regardless of how long the patient will need to be ventilated. And that is important because usually when we do this emergency procedure, it's really hard to know or to predict how long the patient will be on the breathing machine. Sometimes they come out the next day, sometimes they're going to be there for 4 weeks on that breathing machine. And so it's hard to know. It's really hard to know, almost impossible to understand how long it would take to come out of the breathing machine. And so we help in two ways. First, by providing better data, and second, by providing a better structure to when you should be using it.
Excellent. Dr. Tregeri, we have about 12 more minutes. I don't want to impact the completion of your slide presentation, so let's proceed.
Okay. So so I wanted to emphasize the fact that because there won't be necessarily an opportunity to inform the patient who is receiving the tube about the fact that they are entering a study, there are ways the community can decide to, or the individual in the community can decide to opt out of the study. And sometimes if just the patient tell their family, I don't want to do any research, or they communicate their unwillingness to be in this particular study. If we know about that, we'll make sure that this information is in the medical record. And so if this is documented, we will not be using these tubes in these patients, and we'll be using just the standard basic tube. So if we know the position, we have a choice. We can decide not to use these tubes and just use a regular tube. And the important thing, though, is that we don't want the study to interfere with clinical care and or delay the intubation. So a tube will be placed without delay, whether it's a study tube or is a regular tube. We do not want to interfere or endanger the procedure for making a decision.
Dr. Tregeri, I think you have Reverend Clayton's permission now to use the new tube. If you see him and if he needs a tube, give him the new tube. I think you have his permission.
Thank you. But so I will not decide, the provider will not decide. It will be 50-50 chance of getting one. So I want to explain, though, that even though if we don't ask consent before placing the tube, we still ask consent to continue to be in the study. So after we identify a patient that received one of the study tubes, it's the responsibility of the research team to actually go inform the patient if they're able to, make decisions, or their families, to make sure that they know that they've been enrolled in a study, and then whether or not they want to continue to be in the study or not. So there is an opportunity to also withdraw from the study, or be informed about the study anyways after the tube has been placed. And we will continue to attempt to contact the family or talk to the patients all the way while they are in the hospital until they leave the hospital. And this is the information we will provide. So we'll go over the risk of the study and over the benefits. And so the risk of the study that we will be explaining are the following. So because the breathing tube, though, was placed for clinical care, we expect the participant will be exposed to the same clinical risk if they were not in the study. So we don't know, we don't think there are any risk difference between the two tubes, just because of participating in the research study. And also the FDA doesn't flag or doesn't report any difference in complications between the two tubes. So we do believe that the risks are the same. However, because we're studying this in great detail, we could discover some risks that we didn't know about. And that 6 months review will also give us information on things that haven't been tracked in the past. And when we discuss the benefit, we will say that, both tubes are FDA approved for tracheal intubation, and they're used in many hospitals. And there is some evidence that a special tube might help prevent pneumonia. However, and this is the reason why we're doing the study, it is not possible to know right now if the study tube will prevent pneumonia compared to the usual breathing tube. And so will it prevent pneumonia in, half of those patients that develop pneumonia, in every patient that develops pneumonia? We cannot say, we cannot tell that right now, and that's what we're trying to find out. And also because the study is regulated by the FDA may inspect the subject records. This information I'm showing this slide is also on the website, so you don't need to memorize these phone numbers or emails here. But if any member of the community wishes not to be in the study, they can contact us, and so we'll, make sure that if they ended up in a situation of needing an emergency tube, they will not receive a study tube. And so we have a toll-free number, and we have an email, which is yarn@yale.edu. Also, Yale University, some individuals in the community might not want to be in any study, not just this one. And so there is also a mechanism to opt out from any research, and that's optout@yale.edu. And so what we're trying to do right now, and this is what's happening today, is we are trying to involve the community and reach out to make sure the community is aware that we will be conducting this study. And so we can receive feedback. So again, it's very important if you go visit the website and click on the survey. There is a link in English and a link in Spanish. If you could give us feedback. It's a simple survey, but it's important that we know if the community is supportive of the study as it is. So we're doing this with the journals. We had the online survey. We will be posting flyers in public areas, and then we'll conduct extensive training in the hospital of our own providers, doctors and nurses and respiratory therapists, to make sure that they're well familiar with the study. So we have a set of regulatory bodies that oversee the study. So for one, the Yale University IRB, the FDA, the NIH, and also we have an independent data safety monitoring board that actually has the responsibility to independently review the data on an ongoing basis to make sure that the participants in the study are safe. And again, so these are our contacts. They are on the website as well. So I will leave, this is my last slide. I want to again thank you all for listening and engaging and asking questions. Again, the website is medicine.yale.edu/prevent2, and you will find a link to the survey. So that's the way you can help us determining if the community is supportive of the study.
Dr. Tajiri, thank you so much. Might you have 5 more minutes to kind of entertain any questions or thoughts? Dr. Tajiri?
Sure, and I will share my the slides I wanted to show you. Okay, so this just show you again, if you want to note the phone numbers and the email, you can use this as reference. Yes, if there are any questions, I'm happy to take any.
Yes, Dr. Tajiri, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yes, okay, good. Great presentation. Thank you so much. This is Ray Anderson speaking. I have a question for you. So we have, either tube, we're going to pick 1,074 patients alternately, assuming, we are past the disclosure issue. And then for the people getting the special tube, it seems as if there's going to be all types of additional medical care and monitoring. Could you speak a little bit, one, to what that would actually entail, and two, to what types of privacy firewalls there will be relative to that for those who do participate in the study?
Okay, those are great questions. Thank you. So, so once the patient has the breathing tube placed, And the research will start and we'll be monitoring the patient. So we'll be collecting data. Data come from the medical record, and for the most part, the protection in the data is the same protection that is part of the medical record. So we have a lot of measures to keep the data protected. We typically, once the data is collected, we don't save any patient identifier. So the data will be separated from actually the identity of the participant that was in the study. But one important point that I didn't make, and actually it's important that I say right now, what happens when the patients are in the study, the patient with the regular tube will be just managed according to standard of care. The patient that receives the special tubes, actually that tube, that port with the suction will be hooked up to suction and will be monitoring the excretion that come out of that suction tube. Because we need to make sure that we use that breathing tube properly according to the manufacturer recommendation, which is hooking up to a certain degree of suction, to make sure that the secretions are removed along, the intubation time while the patient is on the breathing machine until the tubes come out. So one important thing is that the tube are typically not replaced. Once the tube is put in an airway, it stays until the patient is well enough to have no longer need of the breathing machine. So the tube will stay. What's going to happen is that if the patient decided that they don't want it in the study, that extra port doesn't need to be used and can be actually capped with that yellow cup, and then that tube becomes pretty much the same as a regular tube if you don't use the port. So the two tubes will be the same, and with except that one will be using the suction and the other will not have access to the suction to remove the secretions. So that's the main difference from a clinical care standpoint. Everything else is exactly the same. All the other measures we do to prevent pneumonia, there are other things that we do, like cleaning the mouth, keeping the head of the bed elevated, making sure that the medicine protect the stomach, and a number of things we do to prevent pneumonia still happen in both groups as always. But the difference will be really adding that extra feature that the regular tube doesn't have.
Dr. Travari, this is Leroy Perry. I wanted our audience to know about the involvement of the IRB in this study. I think that's important for them to know that there are safeguards in place with this research study.
Yeah, thank you, yes.
So, Reverend Perry, this is Madeline Baranowski, and to your point, which is a very important point, a number of people from the Yale IRB and Human Research Protection Program are on this call. The IRB, the Institutional Review Board's primary responsibility is the protection of human subjects, protection of privacy, monitoring safety, and the likelihood that risks are reduced as much as possible. And that's why we've worked very closely with Dr. Treggieri in reviewing the study. We pay very close attention to what the community says. We pay very close attention to what the cultural ambassadors have asked about the study, and we pay attention to that to be certain that Dr. Treggieri's research is responsive to that. So we paid attention to that. And you're right, that overview will be from the time it was first proposed all the way till the very last data are collected and and the study is closed.
Great, thank you.
You're tremendous. Dr. Treggieri, we don't want to interrogate you too much. So
the question was fantastic. Thank you.
Maybe just one last question, and if you can consent to come back to perhaps and speak if we need to follow up, whether you have informed or uninformed consent, we'll ask your parents to kind of give you permission to kind of come back to the show in a few months. Let's maybe just entertain one more call before we thank Dr. Treggieri and and for us to get to work on sharing this good information. Is there one more question out there? If not, I'll ask the closing one, Dr. Tajiri. You mentioned the mental. I was really intrigued and excited to see about the mental ability. You referenced that when a person is sick, even their cognitive response and their cognitive recuperation. I was just really intrigued to see that you used the word mental ability in the follow-up. Just in conclusion, I think people need to know that sickness isn't just like getting over biological health, but there's a mental aspect to it.
Yeah. It's true, and especially true when patients are really sick, they can have, their thinking can become difficult, they can have difficulty concentrating, and doing the usual mental things they used to do before. And this is known for patients that have been in the ICU. And so we do try to do everything we can to make sure that actually, in addition to sustaining the heart and the lungs and everything else, we don't compromise the mental ability with either the medicine or the condition that the patient have. And so preserving that is really, and doing the best to preserve that is really important for the future recovery. And so we cannot ignore that at all. It's very important.
Excellent. Let's give her a round. She may not be able to hear us or clapping, but Dr. Jerry, thank you very much. Thank you for everyone that's tuned in. Again, this is the Tom Ficklin Show. Thank you to the Yale Center for Clinical Investigation. Thank you to the Cultural Ambassadors, and thank everyone who's joined in and want to help us share the word. And again, health. Best of health to everyone. Harry, take it away.
Thanks, Dr. Tom.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to all for giving me the opportunity and then for listening. And again, if you have questions, feel free to call us or contact after this call.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As I got another rhyme, another rhythm for y'all to listen. I'm never quitting on my mission. I'm gonna roll with what I'm giving. Got some ambition, this new edition, filling positions. Looking at the void in myself and feeling what's missing. Better watch the way you going. Better go in the right direction. In the moment you stressing, but you gonna be counting blessings. And I know that for certain. Keep on working, open curtains. Haters swerving, cause they ain't ready for your final version. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Yeah, this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. Way too long, we faced them storms. Now you gon' face the dawn you waited for. I said from night to dawn, I right my wrongs alone. In competition with warnings, ice galore. Now I'm running toward it, my lights are finished being a quitter. But little by little, they joking, telling some riddles. Now I'm in my section, ain't willing to give up. Know you getting knocked down, but you gotta get up. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Cause this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go. I'm never gonna give up. Fall down, I just gotta get up, yeah. Yeah, this is my road. Let's camera action, I'm ready to go.